Hi plant parents, I'm James of Pistils and Pollen, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite plants, the majestic Alocasia Macrorrhizos. Now this lovely and ginormous tropical is also known as elephant ear or giant taro, depending on where you are in the world. And one of the reasons it's my favorite is because of just how massive it is. You can see, if I stand up really close to this, how large the leaves are, and this isn't even the largest leaf in my collection. As you can see, these leaves get massive. I can't even get this leaf all the way in the frame of my camera right here and also be in front of it, just to give you a sense of how big it is. I mean, this is like, this is bigger than my chest, my body. You could see this is a massive leaf. Alocasia macrorrhizos gets ginormous. These alocasias grow so large that they're basically an indoor tree. I've got this plant growing in a pot on the floor of my apartment here, and you can see that I'm pretty much standing under one of the leaf fronds that I just showed you, right? Like, it's practically a tree. These gorgeous plants grow in the rainforests of Southeast Asia and Australia, usually in the lowland areas, maybe where a small stream or river will cut through the rainforest and create a little bit of an opening in the clearing of the rainforest canopy. So these plants tend to love, in their natural environment, a little bit more sunshine than maybe some of the other rainforest plants might enjoy. They also love a little bit more water, and in these lowland areas, they're prone to a little bit more humidity and just water overall. So why am I describing the natural history of this plant to you? Well, I think that when we understand something about where a plant comes from, it's very helpful in understanding what that plant might need when we care for it inside of our homes. Let's go over the first one, lighting. So if this plant comes from the rainforest, usually in the lowland areas where there's an open clearing, you know that it can tolerate, or it seems at least well adapted to tolerate, a lot of bright sunlight. Inside your home, I keep these plants near a large south-facing window in my home. I'm in the northern hemisphere. That means that south-facing window is the sunniest window inside my home. I also supplement with a grow light above each of these plants. So I make sure that during the long, cold winter months of Chicago, these plants get all the sunlight they need. Sometimes in the summer, I'll move them out to my deck or balcony just to get a little bit more sunlight during those long summer months. When I do that, I like to be careful not to scorch the leaves, because that sunlight, even though they're accustomed to bright light inside my home, that sunlight outside is super, super bright. It's far brighter than the light coming through the window, which is filtered in my home by double pane glass. So when I do move it outside, I want to make sure that I place it in dappled light. Now, what about watering this plant? These plants love water in their natural environment, and consequently, they love water inside the house. I have them in rather large containers, so those containers have a lot of soil mass to retain the water that I give these plants weekly. I water my plants across my home about weekly. Every single plant gets checked on at least once a week, including these guys. If I need to water a plant more than that, that's a sign to me that I probably need to upplant it, or it's probably a little bit too needy for my home collection. So I like to make sure that these guys have a really large pot so that they can retain enough water to last in between my weekly checkups. And that brings us to soil. In the natural environment, rainforest soil is very permeable. Water likes to rush through it. It's very chunky and organic, right? So I try to mimic that with my aeroid soil mix. If you'd like to look at my aeroid soil mix recipe, it's available online. Check it out in the links below. The key though, when it comes to soil mix, whatever mix you use, is to make sure that you've got a good chunky mix so that it's not going to retain too much water. Even though these plants like a lot of water and they like moisture and they're adapted to it in their natural environment, it's still, I think, a pretty good idea to have a mix that isn't overly retaining water, because then you might have issues such as root rot or fungus gnats or a whole collection of other things that you just don't want to deal with. So a good, well-draining but rich potting mix is going to be key to keeping these plants happy inside your home. Now, what about temperatures? This is a rainforest plant, so it's not adjusted to freezing temperatures. And actually, I would say anything below 60 degrees, 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit starts to get really dangerous for these guys. I've left them outside for temperatures in the low 50 degrees, maybe in the upper 40s, and they've definitely not been happy about it. I haven't lost leaves because of it, but they've been very dramatic about that, mostly dropping or drooping their leaves quite dramatically, right? So I try to keep my plants in that sort of Goldilocks range of 65 to 70 degrees at the low end, up to about 80, 85 degrees. Now, they can tolerate hotter temperatures than that. I've had them outside on my balcony in 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 98 degrees Fahrenheit, full sun, and I've had to come out in the middle of the day and put a shade cloth over it and water it because it was just weeping. I mean, it was just like a peace lily that you didn't water, right? It was just like falling over very dramatically. So try to keep these plants in that Goldilocks zone of 65, 70 degrees to 80, 85 degrees Fahrenheit if you can. Now, what about humidity? I find that these plants are pretty tolerant of regular indoor humidity levels. The indoor humidity of my home is around 40 to 50%, which I think is pretty impressive considering our long, cold, dry winters in Chicago. I do supplement my indoor humidity levels with a whole house humidifier. That helps greatly. And sometimes in the depths of cold winters, I might pull out a supplementary humidifier in order to boost those levels up to that 35 to 40% level, just to keep things happy. Fertilizer. How do I fertilize these guys? They love to eat. As far as houseplants go, I would say that these Alocasia Macrorrhizos are some of the hungriest houseplants in my collection. I regularly use a 20-20-20 fertilizer, all-purpose fertilizer. I fertilize even during the winter months when these plants continue to push out new leaves. In fact, they're pushing out both of them are pushing out new leaves now. You can see this little guy is just emerging, and because of how large these leaves are, think about the amount of energy this plant must extend in order to get it from this little tiny unfurling thing to this ginormous leaf the size of my body, right? It's an amazing and impressive amount of energy, and so I do fertilize accordingly. I use a lot of fertilizer with these guys, especially during the summer growing months. I pretty much fertilize every single time I water. And finally, are these plants pet safe? Unfortunately, no, they're not at all. So if you've got a pet or you have a child that likes to chew on plants, these probably are not the plants to keep in your collection. Keep them away from your pets. They're not pet safe. Now, it's inevitable that eventually on a plant like this, one of these leaves is prone to drooping. I find that a large plant like this is capable of really only retaining 3 to 4 of these really large leaves at one time. And so since you can see that there's starting already to be a little bit of new growth coming in, I'm losing this 4th leaf. So if this is gonna be the 5th leaf, I'm losing this one right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a good cut. So how do I cut through the enormous petiole on this leaf? Well, for this task, I find that a good old-fashioned bread knife is all that I really need. A quick, confident cut is all it takes. Look how massive this thing is. I mean, this is not your average petiole. This is not your average leaf. And that's it. Those are my quick tips for caring for Alocasia Macrorrhizos. One of my favorite plants, and I think if you're able to add one of these to your collection, it will quickly become one of your most impressive, amazing plants as well. If you do decide to buy one of these beautiful plants and add it to your collection, I hope you'll stop by my online plant club. Check it out, there are a lot of resources there. And if you've got any questions or plant care requests, feel free to reach out directly there. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to growing with you.